Back in the late 90s, Rockstar Games saw the success that Angel Studios was having with a game called Midtown Madness, and they wanted a piece of that pie for themselves. So, building on the success of their previous title, now with the support of Rockstar, Angel Studios created Midnight Club Street Racing, released in the year 2000, which alongside Midtown Madness was one of the first 3D open-world racing games ever. They followed it up pretty quickly with a relatively similar sequel, and then completely changed the formula for Midnight Club 3, which finally used real car models and had some overwhelmingly impressive customization, not just for that time, but even compared to modern games today. Then, a few years later, in 2008, we got Midnight Club LA for the Xbox 360 and PS3. An unbelievably good game that seems to have been lost to time in a way. Not remembered as fondly or talked about nearly as often as the black box era Need for Speeds, or even Test Drive Unlimited or Burnout. And it's hard to understand why that is when you have Midnight Club LA in front of you, because this game is truly a recipe for perfection. It nails almost every feature it brings to the table. And while there is certainly an argument to be made for a game needing to deliver on vibes and feel and needing to become more than just the sum of its parts, MCLA delivers there too. I mean, it's a Rockstar game. They know how to build worlds and create a good atmosphere. Now, I did play MCLA when it came out, but it didn't leave a super lasting impression on me either. I mean, I liked it. I would never even remotely consider it a bad game, but it forever sat in this limbo of being a game I remembered fondly, but not very often. And it was always overshadowed by my own personal favorites of that time, like Pro Street or TDU1 or Burnout Paradise. However, a while back, I completed a full playthrough of Midnight Club 3 over on my Twitch channel, and then rolled that right into Midnight Club LA, and was legitimately taken aback by how immensely impressive the game was. And after replaying it for the first time since it came out over 15 years ago, I now think that Midnight Club LA deserves way more credit than it's getting in the racing game space. So in this video, I want to make a case for Midnight Club LA, for why it should absolutely, undeniably be remembered alongside the other arcade racing giants, instead of feeling like a bit of an overshadowed cult classic. LA begins like many other open world racers of the time. You're new in town, but you have a connection to get set up with a car, and you aim to make a reputation for yourself. And before we go any further than this, I need to point out something in MCLA that has always stuck out to me. These starter cars actually look like used cars. I mean, I know it's such a superficial thing, but it has always been kind of immersion breaking for me when other games give you this same premise, that you don't have any money and you just got into town and need a cheap ride, and then your starter car options are all museum quality sports cars. It's super easy to look past that, but it's still nice when a game does it right, and it immediately helps set the tone and make the world and story much more believable. It pulls you in right out of the gate and gives you such a good motivation to work on customizing your car, because it's not just about adding brand new parts to your flawless 90s JDM icon, it's instead about saving up enough money to replace the Steelies with some real wheels and making enough to afford a paint job so all your body panels match. These are things that many real car people experience every time they buy a car, but for some reason it's so rare to see in these big budget arcade racers. But that aside, with your starter car picked, you are essentially set free into Rockstar's 2008 iteration of Los Angeles. And while I usually start these longer review / retrospective sort of videos by talking about the game's handling, I really want to focus first on Midnight Club LA's world. I said it at the start of the video, and I'll say it again, Rockstar knows how to craft a world. I'd argue it's what they do best, and MCLA's map is no exception. This is one of the most detailed, dense, and lively worlds ever put into a racing game. And I have to point out something that longtime viewers of the channel will know is a bit of a sticking point for me. Take a look at these cities from other big racing games of the era. The iconic Palmont City in Need for Speed Carbon. This recreation of Honolulu on Oahu in Test Drive Unlimited 1. And of course, Paradise City from Burnout Paradise. Now let's head back to Midnight Club's Los Angeles. Notice anything different? Yeah, there's actually people walking around. LA is obviously a very densely populated area, and it actually feels like one in the game. Not only is there dynamic pedestrian traffic, but the actual vehicle traffic changes depending on time of day, with heavier rush hour traffic in the mornings and afternoons, and then much lighter traffic in the evenings. LA also has a full 24-hour day and night cycle with dynamic weather, and these are features that were definitely not standard back in 2008. Pulling it back to the actual roads, buildings, and city layout itself, LA delivers heavily here as well, with one of the biggest metro areas in any racing game, and certainly the most detailed. A lot of open worlds in racing games are designed for racing, and of course that's fine, but it means that sacrifices have to be made to the realism of the map. For example, in Horizon 5, there isn't a single gas station or school or hospital or even parking garage. And these roads, by and large, make no actual sense. They're just nice to drive on. Rockstar, on the other hand, built a city with real infrastructure. The roads and highways connect and make sense in a way that feels purposeful, and each district has unique character while also nesting neatly within the larger city. Just like with the Grand Theft Auto games, Midnight Club LA is simply a fascinating place to exist in, because you can just cruise around listening to the pretty solid soundtrack and watching all these systems interact with each other to create a living, breathing world that at no point lets it slip that you're simply just playing a video game. Midnight Club's version of LA is a real simulated world, not just a theme park built solely for you to race through. And the irony of that fact is that in many ways, LA feels better to race through because of that. This game gives you a realistic feeling of what it's like to street race more than arguably any other game I've played. I'm gonna say it again, Rockstar knows how to craft a world, and when we see that applied to a racing game, it stands out so strongly when compared to the rest of the genre. It's also worth giving a shout out to the characters. If Rockstar leads the industry in anything else, it's certainly their ability to fill their worlds with unique and interesting characters. Now, I'll admit, within the wider scope of video games as a whole, MCLA's characters certainly don't stand out and can feel pretty campy. However, under the racing game umbrella, where especially today most characters feel like cardboard cutouts, Midnight Club LA shines again. Just about every character is goofy and a bit over the top in that classic GTA style, but it works and leads to players actually forming a unique opinion on these characters, which I can truly say is something that has not happened to me with a character in Forza Horizon since the very first game. On top of this, MCLA's characters speak to you during races, and your player character can talk too. Not only does this add a lot of drama and reactivity to the races themselves, but it also helps to form those connections with each character and cement you within the world, because you really are racing against another person, not just a car with a name tag on top of it. Midnight Club LA has reminded me that racing games don't need to sacrifice world building and character depth in order to make a good racing game. You really can have it all and still have a game that feels great to race around in. And I think that brings us much more neatly into the actual gameplay and vehicle handling. Now, I'll be honest, I really dislike most modern arcade handling. The recent Need for Speed games, Car X, and the Crew series, they all follow this annoying principle of making the cars just straight up feel bad until you upgrade them, often by introducing a ton of canned understeer and slow steering response or excessive wheel spin at low speeds. And they do this so that you feel a sense of challenge and progression, so that when you do finally upgrade and tune your car enough to where it feels good, it seems like you have accomplished something, but you have to struggle with straight up bad handling until that point. Let me make my opinion on this blatantly clear. An arcade handling model should never intentionally make cars feel bad to drive. You don't have to obey the laws of physics, so why make cars understeer at all? It's a universally disliked feeling. Older arcade games completely understood this mentality. Every car in the Black Box NFS games or Burnout games or whatever else felt like a supercar, and it felt fun, and Midnight Club understood this as well. This is arcade handling as it should be: snappy and responsive, consistent and enjoyable. Upgrades do still have a lot of meaning and depth, but even the stock beginner cars are a blast to whip around the city. Players that are familiar with GTA 4 or 5 will definitely feel familiar with this handling model. It's reminiscent of both of those games, but with a bit more of a leaning into more dynamic and sometimes more realistic car behavior. We also have some fun arcadey features too, like driving up on two wheels, which is a bit of a staple of the franchise, and you can control cars in midair, and special abilities have returned from MC3, but what I love about their implementation in LA is that we can select what ability we want on our car, and then level them up by using them more. This, to me, is the best use of a superhero ability mechanic in any racing game. It's like having Speed Breaker from NFS, but then also having a bunch of other abilities you can pick and level up over time. MCLA also has a pretty detailed damage model. You take damage over time from hitting obstacles or other cars, and that shows up fairly well on the vehicle in the right areas, but if you take too much damage and fill up your bar, it's an instant loss. You'll just lose the race you're in, get busted if you're in a car chase, or whatever else. But you can repair your car in the open world. After each race, you can choose to mechanically repair the car, which will reset the damage meter, but keep the visual damage. Often damaged panels will get replaced with unpainted alternatives, which is a nice touch. But you could also go to a gas station to fully repair your vehicle, or just do it back in the garage as well. It's yet another element of the game that adds that extra layer of realism to the driving. And at the end of the day, MCLA's driving is just simply fun, which seems to be a bit lost to me on the modern arcade racing genre. To be honest, my only real issue with the car handling in MCLA is the somewhat stiff and unpredictable camera, and that the entire game is unfortunately locked to 30 FPS. This is actually something we're going to touch on more later in the video, but for the sake of handling, lower frame rates means slower response time, and that does introduce a bit of lag and reduced precision when it comes to driving cars. It still feels solid across the board though, and I would easily take this handling over just about anything Need for Speed has pumped out in the last decade. So MCLA drives great, with a great world and fun characters, but what do you actually do in this game? Well, this is another area where, again, MCLA shines compared to many of its competitors. This game has plenty of variety in a well-focused and pretty lengthy career mode, with the average playtime coming in around 30 hours. What Midnight Club LA does so well is properly manage its pacing and variety. At any given point, there is just so much to do. You have standard standard racing, which is kind of split between circuit races, and then ordered and unordered races, which are point-to-point events that either do or do not have ordered checkpoints. Then there's red light races that simply start at the nearest red light and finish at some random landmark elsewhere in the city. You have freeway races that naturally take place on the freeway in the open world. You have time trials that take place in set vehicles. There's tournaments where you're scored across multiple events, and series races that can be started from hangouts around the city, and these need you to win 3 races within the series in order to win the whole thing, and they can't be restarted. Then there's wager races where you can put your money on the line for bigger payouts, and for even higher stakes, there are pink slip races where you can bet your car on the race, and they won't let you back out, although they do give you a chance to win your cars back later from the hangouts. And we're not done, by the way. There are delivery missions where you have to take someone else's car from a garage back to their owner without damaging the vehicle. And there's payback missions where you can borrow a beater car to slam around clients who haven't paid their car payments. There's also phone challenges where you'll just get a mission on your sidekick, which, by the way, I just have to point out is so nostalgic for me. I had a sidekick back in high school and loved it, so this is amazing. But anyway, to wrap us up with the cherry on top, there is even a route creator in the game to make your own races that can even be played online with friends. Oh yeah, and they just straight up put a full arcade quick race mode into the career as well, where at any point you can set up a custom race anywhere you want with a bunch of settings, and there's goal attacks where you have to complete unique challenges throughout the various races available to you, and both this and the arcade mode have online leaderboards, and there are even races before the start of the races where you can race opponents to the start of the race to earn some extra rep. And there are dozens of collectibles hidden around the map for you to find throughout your time playing, with every 10 of them unlocking a cheat code. And now I'm done. So obviously I just showed you how much gameplay variety there is in MCLA's single player career, but on top of that, this variety is wrapped up inside the mission system that directs you through the whole game, guiding you along the story path and having you interact with all the different characters in gameplay and cutscenes. And this acts as your compass for what to do. It's not just a random smattering of events that have no meaning outside of completion. You're doing these things for characters to progress the story to its pretty satisfying conclusion. All of this event variety is bundled really neatly into a very strong campaign that sets the pace of the game from start to finish. It might take you 30 or more hours to beat MCLA, but it never really feels repetitive because you're always working towards a new goal and doing something different in some new part of the map for a character you might not have seen yet. And of course, you can break up the pacing a bit by building and tuning cars. And oh man, is the car customization good in this game. It truly does not get the credit it deserves. To start, there are about 60 cars in the game, which is certainly an acceptable roster for a game like this from this time period. And there's also motorcycles, which we haven't even talked about yet, but yeah, this comes from the era where we still had bikes in arcade racing games. But that aside, let's talk car customization. There is a fully featured performance upgrade system with really everything you'd expect, from turbos to tires, and the cars are all neatly sorted into classes in order to keep everything more or less competitive within its own class. For visual customization, in some ways things are scaled back from Midnight Club 3, which had some truly insane levels of customization, but LA also adds so much that it really kind of balances out. What LA did was swap out many of the fantasy parts from MC3 with realistic aftermarket parts. So sure, we don't have like 25 bumpers for every car, but now they're actually good parts that can still be mixed and matched together to create some very unique styles. And on top of those standard realistic body kit choices, we also get wide bodies, spoilers, hoods, headlights, taillights, custom exhausts, license plates, underglow, and window tint. And then we also have more unique customizations, like being able to add a front mount intercooler color or throw on scissor doors. The wheel customization is also incredible. This is some of the absolute best wheel choice I have ever seen in a video game. I mean, you have so many iconic brands and models, and they're all modeled really well. The wheels look so good in this game. Once you have a rim selected, you can of course paint it whatever color you want and change size, tire profile, and width, and adjust ride height, and then you have a ton of different tires to pick from as well. You can throw on some lettered race tires or put on some big white walls. And then finally, you can even throw on a big brake kit from real manufacturers. Oh, and did I forget to mention that MCLA also has interior customization? Yeah, not only can you pick colors for every part of the interior, including the gauges, but you can also add interior neon, swap the steering wheel, install aftermarket gauges, and throw in racing seats. You can still even throw on hydraulics or airbag suspension for all your bouncing and hard parking needs. While it may lack a bit of choice and variety in some areas, this is still, I think, one of the most comprehensive vehicle customization systems in any game ever, really only being matched by its predecessor or Underground 2. But where MC3 and Underground 2 had a lot more choice in some areas, a lot of it was very over the top and wouldn't look good by modern standards. MCLA, on the other hand, is so good at making incredibly customizable, realistic tuner cars. And this is even matched in the paint and livery editor, which was easily among the best of its time. In fact, it's even one of the best editors by today's standards. One of my favorite features is the vinyl packages option that pre-installs essentially a full, complete livery for you, but still applies it layer by layer, so you can go in and edit and add anything you want to change colors or positions or add new elements to the livery, or simply just change the race number. It's super easy if you just want to slap on a cool design, but then it still gives you all the tools you need to really peel it apart and get custom with it. You can even make and store your own custom vinyl packages that can be saved and applied to any other car at any time. So let's summarize. We've talked about MCLA's world being among the best in the genre, its characters being among the best in the genre, its handling being better in my opinion than most modern arcade racers. We've talked about how there is an incredible amount and variety of content, all wrapped into meaningful story progression, and we dove into the customization, showing that MCLA has some of the best visual car customization of any game out there, letting you create realistic, detailed, and unique builds without any hassle. There just isn't any weak point to this game, and we're not done yet. I want to cover a few more features that LA just nails. To start, the police system. And we're entering hot take territory here, but I legitimately think this is the best police system in any racing game. I think Most Wanted might be more fun from like an arcade crazy standpoint, and it's pretty cool how many tactics they can use to stop you. But again, kind of like everything else in MCLA, their police system just feels so real. First off, police are of course always roaming around the open world, as you would expect, and you have a radar to detect when they're close. They will get you for driving in the wrong lane, speeding, or running lights. So if you hear a cop nearby on the radar, it's time to stop speed racing and start following the law. But as soon as they're out of sight, you can go nuts again. And that alone is such a realistic feeling to the real world tuner and street racing experience. I mean, not that I would know or anything, but back in the day when radars were way more useful and popular, it was not uncommon to just mob around everywhere until you started to hear that click, and then you'd slow it down, try to blend in with traffic and see where the cop was, and then once you knew they were gone, you could start being stupid again. That experience is mimicked so well in this game, which is so fun to me. And on top of that, pedestrians can also call you in for driving in areas where you shouldn't be. For example, in a park or on the college campus. But here's what's neat about that. If you are reported for driving in an illegal area, the police respond to that area. They don't just magically know where you are right now, they go to where you were reported and then start searching around that space. The overall pursuit mechanics and difficulty, in my opinion, are also really well done. I mean, again, we're working with Rockstar here. They know how to make a police system. The radio chatter is really well detailed with accurate call signs, car details, and locations, and the police behave how you would expect. They're very competent, but not unfairly overpowered. And they do present a pretty reasonable challenge, especially during longer pursuits, but never really feel like they're a nuisance throughout the playthrough. As long as you pay attention to your radar and make sure not to hang around in one area too long after doing some illegal hooning, then you won't even notice them too much. And this is just yet another area where MCLA at the least goes toe-to-toe with the other best examples of this feature, again, like Most Wanted. And finally, we should briefly wrap up with a discussion about MCLA's multiplayer. Now, sadly, even though the game can still be bought today, many of the servers have gone offline, and really everyone has moved on. But that said, I do want to run through some of the more unique online features that MCLA brought to the table. Really, everything you would expect was here. You could race online in public lobbies in both unranked and ranked matches, and they also held tournaments in-game that you could compete in. You could group up with buddies and cruise around the open world and participate in races with each other, including races made with that route editor, and there were, or in fact still are, leaderboards for every class and every event. MCLA also had one of my all-time favorite social features of any racing game. And honestly, it's something that I'm shocked has not really existed in any other game, at least not to this extent. This was the Rate My Ride feature. You could pick one of your cars to upload to the Rate My Ride system, and then anyone online could rate it out of 10. There were then ranking leaderboards so that you could see what the coolest cars were and where yours ranked among them. On top of this, you could also buy people's cars from the Rate My Ride system, and when you did, they would get a payout the next time they logged in. So there was a very real motivation to try and make the coolest or at least most popular car, so that tons of players would buy it and you could get hundreds of thousands of dollars. There was even a companion website through the Rockstar Social Club where you could interact with this whole feature outside of the game. And admittedly, it didn't work as well as it could have, but it was still an incredibly cool concept, and I can't believe other games haven't taken this idea and expanded on it. Okay, so to wrap us up, Midnight Club LA had an amazing map, great characters, fun driving, incredible customization, a great career with an immense amount of content, and really well fleshed out online multiplayer with some pretty cool features. Why the hell aren't more people still talking about it? Well, I have a few theories, but feel free to let me know what you think, because maybe I haven't thought of everything, or maybe I'm just wrong about how good I think this game is. To start though, MCLA is kind of in this current limbo zone for video game playability. It's too old to feel or look modern, but it's too new to be emulated. At least not well enough anyway. So it's kind of funny because I can play the older game, Midnight Club 3, on a PS2 emulator with upscaled textures and resolution so it looks super crisp, and I can run it flawlessly at 60 FPS, but then when I jump forward a few years to LA, it has to be played on native hardware at around 720p at 30 FPS with pretty rough aliasing. So while I have all the black box NFS games and MC3 and older Burnouts all on my Steam Deck, and many on my desktop PC as well, and all of them can be played at high res and high frame rates, MCLA on the other hand lives exclusively on my Series S that really never gets used. So the lack of availability and modern visuals or even mod support definitely doesn't help. But for what it's worth, Like I mentioned earlier, you can actually still just buy this game today. I do have the original disc from back in the day, but was able to buy it last year digitally for my Series S for like 15 bucks. So availability can't be the only thing holding this game back, because you can still buy it, which can't be said for the vast majority of other old racing games. So instead, maybe people aren't talking about this as much because the series as a whole is dead. We don't really have any reason to constantly reminisce about the good old Midnight Club games because there aren't any new Midnight Club games. You know, I think part of the reason the black box games are put on such a high pedestal now is because we're still getting modern NFS games that in a lot of ways don't seem to capture that Need for Speed magic that so many of us experienced back in the mid-2000s. And the same logic could apply to Horizon or TDU. We always talk about how good the old ones were because it's easy to compare them against the new ones that are still coming out. And maybe there's a bit of an age thing going on too. I mean, this game is nearly 17 years old now, which was end of high school for me, aka peak video gaming time. But I bet for quite a few of you watching, you weren't even born or old enough to play video games like this back in 2008. So maybe it just hasn't caught the attention of a younger generation. And let's be honest, these days when most people think Rockstar, they don't think Midnight Club, they think Red Dead or GTA. The latter of which kind of fills that Midnight Club gap anyway, with a pretty heavy focus on cars, customization, and street racing. Rockstar has shown us no interest in reviving the franchise, GTA makes them way too much money anyway, and there hasn't been a new game in the series in almost 2 decades. So I guess if Rockstar doesn't care, then why should we? Well, because it's a damn good game, and at the very least it deserves a modern remaster, if not a true sequel. Just imagine what Rockstar could do now with Midnight Club. And I know that GTA 6 is probably gonna lean pretty heavily into car stuff again, and it will fill that void for many people, but not for me. The world has lost one of the best racing franchises it had ever seen, but at least I suppose it died a hero with MCLA. So thank you everyone for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.